Welcome back to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're honored to be with our next guest, Dan Ryan. He's the CEO and president of Ryan Partners. How are you doing, Dan?
Great, Jeremy. How are you today?
Doing very well. So we get to dive into talent acquisition and development. We get to dive into leadership, and so all sorts of great topics. But let's start. Give us a little context, a little background for Ryan Partners.
Ryan Partners is an umbrella organization. There are really three different facets to what we do. The first part of that I started in 2006, almost 16 years ago. We've been doing retained executive search for clients all across the country, predominantly in the architecture, engineering, and construction world. We've done work in some other markets as well. In addition to that, we have a growing Vistage practice where I work with business leaders, predominantly in privately held organizations. And then in working with those business leaders, many times they don't have a strategy for leaving their firms. So through my work with Navix Consultants, I help business leaders develop an exit strategy.
When you look at obviously the breadth and the scope, as you mentioned just right there, you've got some that's a little bit more laser focused. You have others where you're working with different industries. And so talk about some of the different industries and the commonalities in terms of pulling those different divisions together for what you do.
Certainly in the search world, having a specific niche where we work is really advantageous because that's really what we're known for. My work with Vistage allows me to actually focus on bringing business leaders together from non-competing industries. And ironically, even though the industries may be as different as engineering and executive search, a lot of the issues are very similar, especially when it gets into ownership issues, it gets into people issues, or it gets into financial issues. I mean, everybody has to have money and they have to have people to get their work done.
Let's stay on the executive search side. And what are some of the trends? Because right now across the spectrum, you're seeing labor shortages, you're seeing a wide variety of issues on the labor front. How are you seeing that play out on the executive search side?
It's just as bad in that area as well. I mean, when you consider people, we do work with leaders, and being a recovering engineer myself, the things that draw people to the engineering profession aren't necessarily the same issues that make them good leaders. So it's tough enough to find people who want to do the work that is required to be an engineer, but then you ask of them, oh, by the way, we don't want you to be the best engineer. We want you to be a leader of people also. It makes it very tough. Also, we're 10 years out from one of the worst recessions in our lifetime, which really hurt that industry quite a bit. Many people left. And then you have the baby boomers. So many people are leaving the workforce. It's almost, to coin a phrase, kind of a perfect storm in the wrong direction, because the demand is really great for services in the, for leaders in the engineering, architecture, and construction world. And there's probably never been less talent available.
Wow. When you look at what that means on your end, in some cases, finding a needle in a haystack, talk about how you're building out your network, how you like to talk about the process, in other words, of working with the companies, trying to find the right fit, what you're looking for the culture fit. What are some of those dynamics?
That's an interesting piece. And even though I've done a lot of work in executive search, I've also done leadership development all along the way and taught at the collegiate level. And having that broader base of expertise allows me to kind of help clients figure out what it is they're really looking for, what their culture is, which really, if you look at the way culture is really defined, it's like how things get done in an organization. And organization A and organization B are very different in how they do that. The more we can know about a company, the more people we can meet within that company, the higher the probability of success when we do a search for them.
Give me one tip on the company side. We'll do one on the company side and one for the individual side, but give me one for the company. When you talk about, like you said, kind of looking for the things that they might not even realize that they need to be looking for. So helping them kind of coach and navigate the process so that they can be successful. What's one bit of advice for a company?
For a company, one of the things we really strive to do before we actually ever go to market is to really understand what the client's looking for. The client may say, we need X, but it may be X plus 2 or X plus 3. And sorry to throw a little algebra in there. Hopefully nobody will get a headache from that. But the more specific the client can be, that's one thing. And then tip 1A on that is flexibility. Especially now, we're coming out of a pandemic where companies have allowed things to occur in the workplace that they've never allowed before. Many people have worked remote. And this remote working environment for many employees is very attractive. I'm not saying that it's always going to be that way, but the more flexible a client can be in allowing people to maybe work from location A or location B, or even work from home some, the more successful they're going to be.
Give me one tip now for an individual who says, okay, I'm looking for a new opportunity, or I want to take the next step in my career. What's a good tip for them? Obviously working with someone like you, but what other tip would you give them?
Well, working with me can be helpful, and we've worked with a lot of people and helped a lot of people over the years, and we don't always get paid for our work. That's not the important thing. I think as a candidate, I would encourage candidates to play the long game. Some candidates are thinking about what is it I want to do next. I would encourage candidates to think about what is it you want to do in 10 to 15 years. And if you know where you really want to go, that will help define whether or not this next step is the right step or the wrong step, because many times candidates will make an impulsive decision. They may get a little bit more money, they may get to stay somewhere, or they may get to go somewhere that they really want to be. And if they really don't know what their ultimate goal is, that short-term yes may actually make for difficulty in the long term.
Yeah, that's good advice. Let's switch over and talk more about Vistage. For those who aren't familiar with Vistage, you gave a little bit of a teaser, but dive in more on just defining Vistage.
Certainly. In Vistage, I work with business owners from non-competing industries, and I bring them together in an environment where they can actually share issues they're dealing with and know that they're surrounded by peers who really have nothing else to do other than be honest and truthful with them. I mean, in the workplace, we're all surrounded by people who want to make us feel good, who want to tell us what we want to hear. If you're leading an organization, you need pure, unadulterated feedback. Vistage has been doing this kind of work. We do it in 20 countries. We work with over 24,000 leaders and CEOs all across the globe. It's a proven practice. It works. We've even done some work virtually over the last year, but now bringing people back together where they can actually learn, grow, develop, and also figure out how to make their company the most successful it can be. That's what we're all about at Vistage.
Talk about the power of accountability and holding each other accountable. I think that's an interesting dynamic too. As you mentioned, the feedback, the real feedback, but especially from those who are proven leaders who've got a track record of expertise and experience that they can share with them. But there's also a level of accountability that goes with that. So talk about that.
Accountability is important. And I think as I'm getting ready to turn 62 this week, people see what you do. They sometimes pay attention to what you say. And I think when we bring the group together, and my first group is about 3 years old, my second group is relatively new, having people who have walked together, they've had life challenges that they've shared with one another, they've had work challenges, seeing how people respond when times get tough, that's how you really figure out who are the people you can depend upon, and who are the people who say they're going to be there, but really don't end up being the ones you want.
What's something that you've learned being a chair of Vistage? What's something that you've personally learned and gained that you've been able to apply to your business or even just your personal life?
For me as a chair, it's a very humbling opportunity to listen and help guide men and women who are really, honestly, interested in the well-being of their business and the people that they work with. I would like to think that they're there because of me. They might like me. In fact, they might even tolerate me. But I think at the end of the day, the real value for the group is the linkage and the partnership and just the friendship they develop with the other members of the group, because collectively their wisdom and knowledge far surpasses anything I could bring, even when I work with them one-on-one. it's like sort of like I'm a coach, but I have this great back room of talent to draw upon in every group I work with.
Talk about the structure of Vistage, because you kind of alluded to non-competing industries, the power of obviously the brain trust and the sharing of experience and holding each other accountable. But talk about structure in terms of meeting times and how it typically works.
So there are several different types of Vistage groups, but the one that is the most common is what we call the CE group. That's typically consisting of CEOs, presidents, or owners of a business. That group will meet together for a full day, 1 day per month. And then in between those meetings, I'll have a one-to-one meeting with each one of them. So we actually will sound out some issues in a one-to-one setting. Sometimes we can actually handle those just talking together. Sometimes I may say, I think you ought to bring this up to the group. So sometimes the issues actually percolate up when the group meets. Sometimes they actually come out of a one-to-one when we're meeting in between meetings.
Give us, don't obviously name names or companies or anything like that, but give us an example of a challenge maybe recently that a business owner has faced that kind of illustrates the power of putting this in front of a group and sharing and being able to work through a problem.
There are several I could mention. One that I think really shows the depth of trust. One of my initial group members had been a leader for a real estate, actually a residential home construction firm. He came to us a couple of weeks before he made a decision to actually leave his current employer, actually start his own residential construction business. By doing that, he wanted to get input from the other members of the group about what are some things he needs to be on the lookout for as he starts to ramp up. But I think it also showed a very high level of trust because the group knew before his employer knew.
Yeah, yeah. Switch over and talk about exiting businesses. This is an interesting area when you talk about being able to build wealth, build value in a business, and understand when is the right time to transition out. Talk a little about that work.
Let me start in reverse. 3 years ago, I was introduced to a 78-year-old gentleman by his son. This gentleman owned a subcontracting firm in the construction world. There was no heir apparent in the firm. There was nobody else there to run the firm. The gentleman's wife was starting to kind of decline in health. He really had nowhere to turn. He had done no exit planning whatsoever. That really kind of got to me, and I thought to myself, business owners need to spend more time understanding, one, when they're going to leave, and two, what their exit's going to look like. One of the phrases I use when I speak to groups about exit planning is, you're going to spend more time this year planning your trip to the beach than you will thinking about your exit plan. And for many business owners, that's the case. But there are a lot of things that we look for. And when I meet with a business owner, there are 20 to 30 questions that I'm going to ask. But the ones that really tell me what's going on, one is, when do you want to exit? And if somebody says 3 to 5 years, that 3 to 5 years is a shifting period of time. I'm going to hold them accountable to a certain date or a certain age. The other thing is there anybody else in the firm that you can turn things over to? Or, what's the longest you've ever been away from the firm? What's the longest trip you've taken? If you can't afford to be gone for more than a week, your business has some issues that need to be addressed before you ever think about transitioning.
Yeah. When you look at kind of stepping in that roadmap, when is the right time? How far in advance? In other words, what's kind of that sweet spot of people saying, hey, I need to start talking about this now. I need to start thinking about this. Obviously the best time is probably now, but when you're talking about urgency and timing, how far out do we need to be having these sort of conversations to really get that ball rolling?
I don't think there's really any time that's too early, but I would say that if you give yourself a 10-year threshold, that's ideal. 5 years will work, but if it's less than 5 years, unless you just have a bona fide business that everybody wants to buy. And the other thing is, there are many ways to transition a business. Some owners are very interested in transitioning it to family members if those family members are in the business. Sometimes they want to sell it to other internal members of the business. And in wanting to do that, they may actually make some concessions on what they take in order to make sure that the culture of the business is kept. Other owners are saying, I'm going to sell it to somebody outside. I want to get the highest multiple available. And then the fourth way, which a lot of people don't think about, is I'm just going to shut the doors. And there are actually things that you should be doing if you know you're going to do just basically close the doors at some future date.
Yeah, good stuff. This is one of those we could go on and on and on, but let's go ahead and wrap up and talk about contact information. So where do we go to reach out to you and your team to learn more? Website, phone number, where do we go?
So to come to Ryan Partners, you'll go to ryanpartners.net. If you go to that website, you can learn about everything we do, the executive search work, the work we do with Vistage with business leaders, and also about our exit planning work.
That makes it easy. ryanpartners.net, RYAN partners.net. So Dan, Ryan, thank you for all you do. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the show.
Jeremy, thank you. It's a pleasure. We're here to serve, and if we can help make a business better in the way that it executes, help that business be better in the way it serves its clients, or help an owner have a happy exit, then I feel like we've done our job.